Ethan Malvo here. Today's Malvo Talk is going to be about guns and the importance of guns here in the United States, but also the topic of the show is going to be, is gun control realistic in America? My short answer to that is no. Because even if you were to put forward and pass a limited legislative bill dealing with gun control, in time, it would eventually be uprooted, because one thing that the media, as well as many officials will not, as well as historians, will not admit to, conservatives may be, depending on the context of what is being said, that guns were necessary in order to pacify the country. Now that may be considered to be a very simplistic and overly simplistic statement, but not really. It goes to the fundamental part of how this country was founded, settled, and, as I say here, pacified. The pacification of a country has everything to do with the fundamental laws that go into establishing what is semantically called law and order, but to the roots of the control of the head of state, the central government, whatever you want to call that. And you must remember that unlike England, for instance, where the wars that pacified that country and made it subject to the crown of England had to do with the sword. That happened before the period of the gun. The arquebus, which was the primitive form of the gun, was not introduced into the European warfare until the late 14th, early 15th century, and really did not take hold until the latter half of the 15th century in terms of European warfare, especially in the guise of the cannon. But the idea of the gun, you could not have pacified, you could not have subdued the American territory without the gun. And the first settlers, one of your, and particularly in terms of the joint stock company, one of the essential things that the settler had to have was the musket. Now, you do have, and America by no means was the only territory in regards to either the British Empire or any other of the European empires, for that matter, in which you needed to have the gun. But when you look at places like Australia, where the gun was essential in terms of the policy of colonization, India as well, South Africa, where the white people there and those white people who are called the bywaters, and I think I'll take them up first, needed the gun. And in the wars against particularly the Zulus, that was their advantage. And when you have, now to go back to the American colony, where you had, certainly at the beginning, a situation where the European was in the minority, you need to have that gun in order to secure the territory belonging to the European power. Never mind law and order. You had to have that. And when you had, as particularly in some states in the South, not to mention the ironic fact, but nevertheless poignant fact, that some of the states, in particularly South Carolina, and then later on you would get further out into the West, and I'll talk about that in a second, but particularly in terms of South Carolina, where you had a black population that outnumbered really the white population, you had to have a gun in order to keep the status quo of not only peace, but also you needed to have the gun just in case, and you could go back into the black codes and see how the restrictions surrounding guns and black people were a central part of the law. The slave and even free blacks could not have a gun without some kind of authority given to them by way of a badge or even a permit given to them by the owner that said this man of color, this colored man, was allowed to have a gun. But indeed, in the state of South Carolina, you had the situation where slave rebellions were so feared that the slave owners, as many people who study this history know, took their guns with them to church just in case they had to put down a slave rebellion in the midst of Sunday service. And coming further into the 19th century, you had a terrible situation developing in terms of the settlement of the West. Which really secured this aspect of the gun as a kind of talisman to security and safety. And in the next episode, I'll finish it up in the next episode, I'm going to talk about the settlement of the West, because that whole process is the reason why you really cannot get any serious gun legislation through. Forget about the NRA. It is the history of how this country, and particularly the federal government, brought the West to heel, which is the reason why guns are so sacrosanct, and more so than in terms of the Second Amendment, which gives and lays the foundation of having guns as a fundamental right as far as this country is concerned. But the pacification of the West is the real heart and the meat of the thesis of why you cannot have serious gun control in this country.